The average medieval knight was dead by 35. Not from battle, not from a sword through the chest, from infection, from exhaustion, from wearing a metal oven on his body for 16 hours straight in summer heat. You've been sold a fantasy, shining armor, noble quests, chivalry, saving damsels. The reality, it was one of the most physically brutal, financially ruinous, and genuinely disgusting lifestyles in all of human history. And today, we're going all the way in. No filter, no Hollywood, just the raw, ugly, fascinating truth about what it actually meant to be a medieval knight. Buckle up. Let's start with the most iconic image, the knight in shining armor. Full plate armor. Looks incredible. Looks impenetrable. Looks completely impractical if you actually think about it for 5 seconds. How much did it weigh? A full suit of plate armor weighed between 15 and 25 kilograms. That's like strapping 4 or 5 car tires to your body and then being asked to fight for your life. And here's what the movies never show you. You couldn't just put it on yourself, you needed a squire. Getting fully armored took up to 30 minutes, every single time. Late to battle? Too bad. Your squire overslept. You're dead. The heat problem. Steel conducts heat brilliantly. In summer, knights were essentially climbing into a human oven. There are documented cases of knights dying from heat exhaustion before a single blow was struck, just standing in formation in their armor. In July, the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, hundreds of French knights drowned in mud because their armor was so heavy they couldn't get up after falling. Not killed by arrows, not killed by swords, drowned. In a field. The smell problem. And now for the detail nobody puts in the movies. You cannot wash inside armor. You sweat for hours. The padding underneath, called a gambeson, absorbed everything. Blood, sweat, other things I won't name. Medieval chronicles actually describe enemy knights being identified by smell alone from a distance. That's not a joke. That's a primary source. Here's something nobody tells you. Becoming a knight was extraordinarily expensive. We're talking about the medieval equivalent of buying a Ferrari every year. The cost of armor, a full suit of quality plate armor, cost the equivalent of roughly 3 to 5 years of a skilled craftsman's wages. Not income, wages. 3 to 5 years of someone else's entire salary, just for the armor, and it wore out. It got damaged. It needed constant repair. A knight who fought regularly needed new or repaired armor constantly. The horse problem. But the armor was actually the cheaper part. The horse was the real killer. A knight's warhorse, called a destrier, cost between 10 and 40 times more than a regular horse. And you needed multiple horses. One for battle, one for travel, one as backup. Lose your horse in battle? Congratulations. You just lost the medieval equivalent of a small house. The training cost training started at age 7. 7. A boy sent away from his family to serve as a page, then a squire, then, if he survived and his lord approved, a knight at around 18 to 21. That's over a decade of training that his family paid for. Not a scholarship, not a grant. Cold, hard cash, or land, or favors, or all three. The brutal truth? Most men who wanted to be knights never made it. Not because they weren't skilled, because they couldn't afford it. Okay, the moment you've been waiting for. Actual combat. What did it look like when knights fought? Short answer, nothing like the movies. The reality of a sword fight movie, sword fights last 3 to 5 minutes. Two skilled warriors dancing around each other, exchanging beautiful choreographed blows. Real sword fights between armored knights lasted seconds to minutes. They were ugly, brutal, exhausting. Full plate armor is actually extremely effective against sword cuts, so knights didn't slash at each other like in the movies. They grappled, they wrestled, they looked for gaps in the armor, the armpits, the visor, the back of the knee. They used daggers at close range, specifically designed to go through armor gaps. Called a misericord, literally mercy blade, because you used it to finish a downed opponent. Up close, personal, ugly, the ransom system. Here's something genuinely fascinating, though. Killing an enemy knight was often considered bad business because of the ransom system. If you captured a knight alive, his family would pay to get him back. Sometimes enormous sums. Some knights made their entire fortune not from land or service, but from ransoming captured enemies. The Black Prince, Edward of Woodstock, captured the King of France himself at the Battle of Poitiers in 1356. The ransom? 3 million gold crowns, the entire French royal treasury. Bankrupted France for years. So medieval warfare had this bizarre economic logic, where the most valuable thing you could do was not kill the other guy. What wounds actually looked like. When knights did get seriously wounded in battle, the results were horrific by modern standards, and medieval medicine made it worse. Arrow wounds were particularly bad. The broadhead arrows used at Agincourt could punch through plate armor at close range. Surgeons pulled them out with pliers, without anesthetic. While the patient was conscious, infection killed more knights than enemy weapons. Always, in every major medieval conflict, the sword was dangerous. Bacteria was the real enemy. Okay, so battles were brutal. But battles were actually rare. What did knights do the rest of the time? Honestly, suffered in different ways. On campaign, medieval armies moved slowly, very slowly. An army on campaign covered maybe 20 to 30 kilometers per day on a good day. In rain, which was constant in England, sometimes half that. Knights slept in tents, or on the ground, or in whatever building hadn't been burned down yet. They ate salted meat, dried bread, and whatever could be foraged or stolen from local villages. Dysentery, severe intestinal infection, was the constant companion of every medieval army. The Crusades lost more men to dysentery than to Muslim armies. That's documented fact, not opinion. The tournament circuit. When there was no war, knights went to tournaments. And this is where the movie version actually gets something right, except for one detail. Early tournaments weren't the clean jousting events you see in films. They were full-scale mock battles called melees, dozens of knights fighting simultaneously across open fields, villages, real terrain. People died regularly. The Catholic Church repeatedly banned tournaments because the death toll was too high, even by medieval standards. William Marshall, considered the greatest knight who ever lived, participated in over 500 tournaments across his career. He never lost. He also watched friends and opponents die at those same events throughout his life. The psychological cost. This is the part that almost never gets discussed. Medieval knights killed people, regularly, up close, face to face, and medieval society gave them very few tools to process that. The church offered confession and penance. Some knights went on pilgrimage after particularly brutal campaigns. Historians interpret this partly as a coping mechanism, a way to process what they'd done and seen. The code of chivalry wasn't just about being polite to ladies. It was a psychological framework designed to give meaning and structure to an extremely violent profession. Without it, you were just a paid killer. With it, you were a warrior of God. Whether that actually helped? The chronicles suggest it was complicated. I want to end with a real person, because after all of this, the brutality, the cost, the misery, there were men who genuinely thrived in this world, and none more than William Marshall. Born around 1147, fourth son of a minor noble, no land, no inheritance, no future, by the standards of his time. He became the most celebrated knight in Europe. He served 5 English kings. He fought in dozens of real battles. He won hundreds of tournaments. At 70 years old, 70, he led a cavalry charge at the Battle of Lincoln and won. Against an army half his age. He lived everything we've talked about today. The armor, the cost, the wounds, the campaigns, the killing. And at the end of his life, as he was dying, his biographer records him saying something that cuts right through 700 years of history. I have told you little of the bad things I have done in my life. God must forgive me, for I can no longer make amends. That's not a Hollywood knight. That's a real human being at the end of a real life. One of the most violent and remarkable lives in medieval history. That's what knighthood actually was. So, Hollywood knights. Noble, clean, romantic. Real knights. Broke, exhausted, smelly, and dead by 35. Honestly, I think the real version is more interesting. If you want more of this, the real history behind the legends, hit subscribe. Next video, we're going even deeper into the medieval world. Drop a comment. Which fact hit hardest? My money's on the French knights drowning in a field. See you next week. Stay sharp.